Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, I am ecstatic to be talking to Diane Flores, IFBB Pro. Diane, thank you so much for accepting my invite.
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited to be here. You have some amazing content, so this is fun.
Thank you, Diane. So, can you share a little bit of a background about your what you do right now and a little bit about the competing journey, but I'm going to ask you a little bit more detail, obviously, as we go through
Sure.
the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been in the bodybuilding world since 2010. Right now, I have a personal training studio that's exclusively for women here in my local town, which is Modesto, California. So if anybody's in the area, you can always do a drop in. We specialize in training that is very much what you would see a bikini girl training, wellness girls. We focus on training to change the shape of your body. So we're not like, just come here to lose weight. It's like, let's build some muscle and create some shape and get you healthy and strong. So that is my actual physical business. It's called Venus Fitness Studio. Had for 16 years. And my competing journey started, like I said, 2010, 2011. I've done 16 shows. I started in figure. I then went to bikini for 4 shows. And then I went back to figure and I earned my pro card in figure in 2020, 2021.
And
Yeah.
okay, there you have it.
Yeah.
So 11 years from beginning the competition to actually getting your pro card. This is not
Yeah.
something that happens overnight.
No. And I honestly had no intentions and like focus for my pro card. I thought that would never happen. I was just very much, that's never going to happen. I'm just a mom. I have 3 kids. I had seen plenty of pros that were moms and had kids and things like that. But for me, I was just like, no, I'm just doing this for fun and to motivate myself and to inspire other women that can see, oh, she's a mom, she's got kids, she has a history of, being overweight, and I have stretch marks. Like I'm just like the average everyday woman, which some people find like hard to believe because they're like, you've done 16 shows, that's not normal.
Right.
And I'm like, you're right, I'm a little crazy. But yeah, it was really just to get people to see that you can do hard things, right? Like I've been through some major adversities, in my young age. I was a teen mom at 16, had another baby. I had 2 kids by the time I had just turned 20. Living on my own, doing mom things, single mom, no, their dad wasn't around. So I always think like if I could do that, like that was
Mhm.
so hard. That life was so rough, so hard. I could do anything. So competing was my passion. And then it just turned into 16 shows, getting my pro card. I have a team as well. So I coach other athletes and I have some IFBB pros on my team as well. So it just turned into a passion, turned into a business, which is great because you never feel like you're working now.
I love that. Um, can you share a little bit about your childhood and how it was growing up and how that eventually factored into getting pregnant at 16?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. This is juicy. No one's ever asked me that. Yeah. So, I came from, my parents were, I don't want to say we were poor, but we were broke. Like my parents were blue collar. My dad was, uh, he moved here when he was 13 from another country, not speaking English. My parents are from the Azores, which are the islands off the coast of Portugal. So my whole family, like nobody went to college, nobody had degrees or businesses or anything. And had a great childhood. My parents were very loving. Um, and at some point, when I turned 13, my parents divorced and I lived with my father. And my dad's an amazing man. He's got an incredible work ethic. However, because of him constantly working, I was kind of like doing whatever I wanted all the time. I got to I ditched school a lot and I didn't have many friends in school. I had one friend throughout high school, who was my best friend. And I just became very introverted and quiet and shy. And I was just boy crazy. And so, I, I honestly, I think the fact that in high school, I wasn't involved in a lot of high school activities. You know, I tried out for the cheerleading team. I did cheerleading for a little bit, but I was not in sports. You know, my parents couldn't afford the cheerleading uniform. So fundraising was always like a thing we had to do. If I wanted to do cheerleading, you know, my parents couldn't take me to sports because they were both working. So it was always a struggle for me to try to do anything extracurricular. So I just became really introverted and, you know, eventually met the bad boy and bada bing, bada boom, got pregnant. And, you know, I was 16 when I got pregnant. I had him when I was 17. And that was my junior year of high school when I got pregnant. And then my senior year was homeschooled mainly because I had an infant. And then after that, I ended up getting pregnant again. And I had 2 children by the time I turned 19. And that was, you know, that was tough. It was me being very prideful that I didn't want to like live with my parents forever. So I ended up moving out relatively early with 2 little ones. I got on every form of like government assistance you could possibly imagine. So I had like we call them back in the day, we called them food stamps. I think it's called like EBT now or something. So I was on like food stamps. I was in government housing. So I lived in the projects that the government paid a portion of. And so based off my income, I paid, I don't know, a few $100s a month for. I was in this program called WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children. And you get like bread and cheese and apple juice until they're 5. And then I was on Medi-Cal, which is like the state insurance at the time. So I exhausted all those options. In the meantime, I was working 40 hours a week at a doctor's office. I worked for a doctor in infectious disease for 7 years. And I started as the receptionist and then eventually worked my way to the back office because I was just always wanting to learn more. So I was doing kind of medical assistant type of duties. And I then started working at Gold's Gym as a second job and the daycare, and I could take my kids with me. And that is when I started to really ponder competing. You know, I was working out. I started working out in high school, like a PE. I did weight training and that was like my thing. But yeah, Gold's Gym, daycare, I'd leave my kids and then I could go and train. You know, I got free gym membership. It was wonderful. And that's kind of the start of the story. You know, I started living on my own when I was, I believe, 20, maybe 21 with 2 small children.
What was the reaction of your parents? Because you were still living with your dad at 16 and when you had gotten pregnant, what was the reaction of your parents? And they try to like, how was that dynamic?
That was tough. My dad didn't talk to me for a couple months when he found out I was pregnant. My stepmom is a saint. She's basically raised me, you know, since I was 12, 13. And I would tell her,
Yeah.
I told her, and I was like, you need to tell my dad.
Right.
And so she did both times. And, you know, my dad sat down with me and, you know, my dad's a very prideful man, very, you know, old school. And the first thing he said to me wasn't like, oh, your future's ruined. It was, what are people going to think? Right? Like, what are people going to think? You're pregnant. Like, what are they going to think of me as a parent? What are they going to think of you? It was very much like concerned with other people's opinions. And so that stuck with me. You know, I never forgot that. I'm like, this is my dad's main concern, you know? And again, my dad, blue collar, at any given time usually had between 3 and 4 jobs. And so fast forward a little bit, at one point I decided I wanted to be a nurse because I was in the medical field. And I thought, well, I'm not going to, you know, I'm kind of capped out with my income here and I want to earn more income. And the next logical step would be to become a nurse in the medical field. And so I enrolled at the college and I, you know, sat with my parents. I said, you know, can you guys help me with the kids? It's one night a week. And my dad just sat there and he's like, you're wasting your time going to college. You need to work. Like, what are you doing? Why are you going to school? That's not paying you anything. So education not highly valued in my family. So I finished that semester, and I just doubled down on working and as much as I could with my second job. And then I started some like random side jobs. I had like an eBay store and was just selling like I'd go to thrift stores and I'd find designer baby clothes that I knew were very like popular. Of course, I had my third son by that time, and was selling like baby clothes on eBay and was making, you know, a few extra $100 a month. And yeah,
Right.
that's my entrepreneurial journey started with my eBay
Right.
store. Yeah.
And when you found out you were pregnant, I don't know why I'm asking so many questions.
No, this is great. I've never talked about this, so I'm
Right? I
fine.
just
Yeah,
were
it's good.
there, you know.
Yeah.
Um, how did you receive the news that you got pregnant? How did you feel about it?
Um, it was incredibly overwhelming.
Mhm.
I I had, you know, I think the initial thoughts were like, my life is ruined. You know, what am I going to do? This is going to make everything so much harder. Um, it was, you know, I think for a flash of a moment, I had considered not following through with the pregnancies, both of them, um, because I knew what I was going to be up against. Like I knew this was going to change my life forever, no doubt.
Mhm.
And just my personal decision, I just decided, you know, this is what I got myself into, and I'm gonna step up, and I'm a mom. I'm a mom. With my daughter, when I got pregnant with her, I'll never forget that day. I went to Planned Parenthood. One of my girlfriends came with me. I could not afford to go buy a pregnancy test at the grocery store. So I went to Planned Parenthood with my 6 month old in the carrier. Okay. Because my son was, you know, about 6 months old. And I went into the exam room, you know, I did the whole pregnancy test. She comes back and she says very nonchalantly, okay, well, your tests are positive. Your pregnancy test is positive. So here's some resources. Should you choose to, you know, want to remain, you know, with the pregnancy, or you want to
Mm.
not follow through,
Mm.
and just handed me some pamphlets and like scooted me on my way. And I was just stunned,
Yeah.
you know, stunned. And I just remember walking out of there, grabbing my son, and just having a complete and utter meltdown in my car, because this was just reliving what I had just gone through with having
Right.
the first baby. So at that time, I was enrolled in beauty school,
Okay.
and it was through the school. And I was finishing up, I think I had maybe 600 hours of cosmetology school left, which whenever I tell people who've gone through beauty school, they're like, you were so close. I'm like, I could not face those people in that beauty school pregnant again, because they had already seen me go through the first pregnancy and like take time off from beauty school, have my son, and then I had just came back.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to be a high school beauty school dropout. And that's what I
Mm.
did. So yeah, it was tough, but honestly, I can't imagine my life being any different,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And
My
now,
kids are amazing. My oldest two, well, all three of my children are amazing, but um, you know, they're responsible adults. My daughter's worked for me for 10 years now, since she was 16. Um, and you know, we're close. And now I'm in a space where I'm 45. My kids are grown. My youngest is almost 18. And it's like I feel like I have a whole new lease on life, and I have all the wisdom from everything that I've gone through, you know, for the past 27 years.
wow, I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us and
Yeah.
indulging my curiosity.
No, it's great. I don't talk about it much. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Yeah, because I really feel like early life experiences really shape us and really have to do so much with everything we end up doing and the way that we do it. And that's why
Hmm.
I like to see the beginnings, you know,
Yeah.
and how that had an impact. So 2010, we started competing.
Yes.
And how did you start the prep? Did you hire a coach or did you do it yourself? Was it hard? All the good stuff.
Yeah. So I had had my eyes on competing for several years before I actually took the plunge. And the reason being is Mainly there wasn't anybody in our area. And I knew that if I wanted to do something like competing at that time, it made sense for me to have a local coach. It was very new. I was very scared. Prior to finding my coach here locally, I had hired, I don't know if you've ever heard of Julie Laurie, but she's very old. She's very old school in the sense that she's been around forever. I think she still coaches athletes. She was I believe a figure Olympian back in the day. And I had hired her because I was going to be doing a photo shoot. Now, one piece of my story I have not told you is when I started my business, I actually started it as a pole dancing studio.
Oh,
So
nice.
yes, so 16 years ago, my business started as pole dance, and that's a whole nother story. But essentially, I have no experience with exotic dance whatsoever. Okay, I was a mom at 16, like I ain't doing any of that.
Right.
I wasn't like, there was no time for that. But I was working from home doing medical transcription after I got pregnant with my third son, because I was kind of doing it as a side hustle. And at the time, I had Googled like parties for women. So we did like candle parties, purse parties, Mary Kay parties. We did all the little parties, my sister and I, with her friends, because I didn't have any friends at the time. And I was always the one looking for the next thing. And I found pole dancing parties for women. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Oxygen magazine from back in
Yeah.
the day. It
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
okay. So I was a devout Oxygen magazine girl.
Me too.
And they used to have a forum,
Yeah.
and I was like obsessively in that forum, and I found pole dancing for fitness. And I was like, what the heck? That sounds so much fun.
Yeah.
Long story short, no one in our area did it. And I found kind of an MLM company that would sell you the pole
Right.
and their marketing booklet to like market it. And then some spa products that you could like sell at your parties, you know? So yeah. So I called my sister and I said, hey, what if we taught pole dancing? And she's like, pool dancing. She's like, well, you don't even have a pool. I'm like, no, pole, like stripper pole.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know how to dance like that. And I said, I don't either, but I'm willing to learn.
Right.
So
It's hard.
we bought into this MLM. I think it was like, I don't know, $700.
Yeah.
And instantly I realized they wanted to have control over all the things. So, with just how you do everything and present things marketing wise and all that. And I had other ideas, right? I wanted to rename the business and all that. So eventually we did away with that. And my business literally started from me posting on MySpace back in the day.
Mm.
And we started teaching in my home. And it went from like once a week to twice a week to 3 times a week. And I was like kicking at the
Teaching
time.
pole dancing on,
Yeah,
but that's how you got your leads from MySpace.
yes,
But
yeah.
how did you learn the pole? Because I know how tough that can be.
Oh, it's so tough. So we bought this package from this MLM company. It was called A Pole Lot of Fun. Okay. They were based, cheesy, they were based out of Canada, and they sent us these videos. So it was like step by step taught you how to pole dance and
Right.
teach a pole dance party. And so it's very basic. It's super simple stuff that just anybody can really do. It's
Right.
not complicated whatsoever, but that was the start of me really being into what pole dancing was. And so then I bought every DVD, I watched every YouTube video, I went and took workshops and seminars and certifications and all the things in pole dancing, sensual dance, lap dance, striptease, all of that. Life-changing experience. Like it created a completely different path for me as a woman, and just like being in my body and appreciating my sensuality and like all these things. But that's how we started.
Right.
And again, it went from my home to I rented a little space in a studio in a salon in town that was like 500 square feet. We outgrew that space. Then we moved to another studio. It was 1,500 square feet. And now the studio that I'm at now. But the pole dancing we did for about 10 years. And then it's fun. It's amazing. I did so much with that business, and we touched so many women's lives and changed their perspective on their bodies. It just was not a lucrative business model for longevity wise. People would
Right.
come in. It was very, you know, like if you were getting married and you wanted to do your bachelorette party, or you wanted to like learn a sexy dance for your, you know, your partner or whatever. But
Right.
it wasn't like fitness where people were signing up to stay for, you know, some of my personal training clients have been with me for 3 years. You know, most of our pole dance clients would last about 6 months at max. We did
Got
have some unicorns that would last a little bit longer, but it was very far and few between.
Yeah, yeah, I'm noticing that with my coaching clients too. It's like when you work with someone, they stay with you for a very long time, and it's like a
Hmm.
recurrent revenue because you to really better serve that person, it takes a while to get that relationship
For
between,
sure.
the coach and the client, and then it gets better and better and better the longer you work with someone. You know everything about them, where they're
Yeah,
struggling. So
totally.
so the pole dancing was 10 years. Was it from
Yes.
2010 till 2020 as well?
I started the pole dancing business when my son was, I think, 1.5. So it was like 2007 when I
Got
started the pole dancing.
got it.
So he's about to be 18. So it was about almost 17 years ago, 16 and a half years ago when I started the pole dancing. And so once I started that, I started to like, my body started to change from just teaching pole dancing 6 days a week.
Oh,
And
wow.
I started to create a curriculum that was called like pole fit
Yeah.
and, you know, pole flexibility, pole strength, and like all these different kinds of classes. Well, when you're teaching them, it's like an aerobics teacher. I'm doing it with them. So 6 days a week of pole dancing and climbing up and down the pole and doing tricks and all this stuff.
Yeah.
My body started to change. I got more into fitness. And then I found my coach one day when I was taking my daughter to dance. There was a postcard on the counter, and I saw two athletes, and I grabbed that. It was in my purse for quite some time. And I finally got the nerve to call this coach. I go meet with him. He owns a supplement store and a personal training gym here in town. And I asked two of my good friends at the time who were working for me at my pole studio. I said, hey, will you guys do this thing with me? Like, I really want to compete, but I know I got to train with this personal trainer. We walk in, he looks at me, and I said, I'm really interested in competing. I heard that you offer competition coaching. And he literally looks me up and down and he goes, yeah, you and everyone else. Because I said, I want to compete. And he goes,
Yeah.
yeah, you and everyone else. Yes. And this started my relationship with my first coach that ended to be 2 years. And we ended up, he was like a brother to me, you know, by the time I finished my journey with him. But I started training with him 3 days a week. And for the first year, I think I missed 1 week because we went to Hawaii as a family, but I never missed a session. My friends, they stopped after 3 months, and they were like, oh, they were cardio queens. So they're like, oh, I don't think it's working. You know, I'm not losing any weight. And I was like, look, this man knows the secret. He's put multiple people on stage. I'm just going to do what he says. I'm
Yeah.
going to figure it out until it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't, then at least I can say I tried.
Right.
So he told me if I trained with him, he would take me seriously after a year.
Oh, nice.
Uh-huh.
It's true though,
So
right? I mean,
yeah,
because so
so
many
I think
people are casual about it. They think they want it, but
totally.
they don't understand what it takes, which I know you're gonna go there in a bit.
Yes. So
Yeah.
and I had respect for that. And I totally get it now, in hindsight. But so then he says to me, if you can follow this diet during the holidays and lose, I think he said 10 pounds, then we'll talk about putting you in prep. And at this point, I was not eating healthy. Like, listen, my diet was like, what are those 80-calorie beers, like Michelob Ultras or something from back in the day, like the 80-calorie low carb, low calorie beers. That was like a staple in my diet. Okay. I was
Wow.
drinking those most
Yeah.
days of the week. Sandwiches were my normal go-to, and breakfast was usually, I don't know, like a bagel or something. I was just kind of eating haphazardly.
Hmm.
And so he hands me the diet, and I look at it, and immediately I see no sandwiches and there's no beer. And so I look at him and I said, there's no beer on here. And he's like, yeah, D, let's talk when you've lost 10 pounds. And I said, okay. So I took that diet and I did it to probably like 85 to 90%. And I ended up losing 7 pounds. And he's like, okay, like, let's do this. And he put me in a prep, and I followed his plan religiously, did not cheat a single solitary time that first prep. And I ended up being early by like, I think it was like 4 to 6 weeks. I was ready.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is a terrible place to be in when you're hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he just, he kept giving me refeeds and things like that. But long story short, great. I was just grateful to compete.
Yeah.
And, that day I was just like a deer in headlights. I really didn't know much
Mm,
about what was going on. He didn't really explain it to us. We did posing and stuff, but I had no idea what was going on. And I ended up taking fifth place in
right.
that show, which was huge for me because I think that show probably, I think there was like 16 or 17 girls. So I was like, I was hooked after that.
You said fifth place in your first
Mhm.
show. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, they didn't do like true novice and novice back then, so it was just all
Yeah.
open. I feel like maybe they had masters, but I wasn't old enough to do masters yet.
Right.
So yeah, it was just open. And when we had came out for prejudging, I had got second call outs, and it looked like I had like 13th place, I think my coach had said. But then when we went back for the night show, I don't know, apparently they must have rejudged or something, and I ended up with fifth place. And I was like so over the moon about that.
I'll take it. Of
Yeah, I
course.
was so stoked. Yeah.
And that was figure, the figure
Yeah,
division.
that was figure.
Okay. And did you have cravings in that first prep? You know what they say, first prep,
Yes.
worst prep? I stole that from Adam Bonilla.
Oh, really? Yeah. No, that's a
You
good
say
one.
that.
That's
Yeah.
actually a really good one. Yeah, my cravings were, you have to think like I came from a highly processed food diet
Right.
to a whole foods diet. Now, keep in mind, I had my gallbladder removed right before I had my daughter because my gallbladder, I was living on McDonald's. I was eating a very high fat food diet. I
Yeah.
had got pregnant. I was over 200 pounds at one point. And so my gallbladder was on the brink of explosion, and I had to have an emergency surgery. I was in the hospital for almost 10 days, and there was infection. They had to like get the infection down. So the reason why that's important is because before I started competing, I still had a lot of like GI symptoms from not eating properly, right? Like
Mm,
I was still eating really high fat foods. And so it was always a situation for my GI. When I switched to competition prep, I felt so much better. I had so much more energy. I did not have the GI problems that I was dealing with. So it was like a breath of fresh air for me to see how impactful my nutrition was.
right.
So when I started to see that, I then realized like, oh my God, I didn't realize that I've been living feeling like shit until I started to feel good, you know?
Right.
I was just like, oh, this is just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And so then I became incredibly passionate about teaching other people that like nutrition was so important for not only how you look, but how you feel. So I went through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. I just wanted to get some more knowledge about nutrition. So I got my certification through them and, their nutrition coaching program. And then that's when I started really coaching women for competing, lifestyle, and all that fun stuff was way back then. But yeah, the cravings, they always get you.
Yeah, yeah. Especially that first time, but I guess you have motivation, a lot of excitement, and dopamine coming from the excitement of doing something new, and
Yes.
finally your coach agrees to prep you, and you don't want
Mhm.
to let him down, and also how that's going to impact your life, so
Yes.
that can kind of get you through those cravings that you may have otherwise felt more intensely, in that first
Yes.
prep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And there's sometimes like, I've done 16 shows. I can't tell you how many times I have had moments where I have caved
Yeah.
and I have cheated on my diet and I have lost my shit in like a whole sleeve of rice cakes. Just it
Yeah.
happens. And I've I've had I think five coaches through my 16 shows. And some of the coaches have just been lifestyle stuff when I wasn't going to compete at all. And four of them were men, which I'm not saying this is a man thing, but just they had zero empathy or sympathy or understanding for me, like having gone off my diet,
Right.
you know? Whereas for myself as a coach, because I've been there and I understand that, um, I'm not here to scold people. You're an adult. You know this is going to set you back. I don't need to make you feel any worse about it than you already do, because trust me, I've done this. I've beat myself up over it. And so it's like, okay, let's reverse engineer what brought you to that craving. Was it a stress point? You know, what's going on in your life? Do we need to add a supplement to help with stress? Do you need more sleep? You know, are you dealing with an emotional situation at home? So it's not just like, here's your meal plan and here's your training and smack you on the ass and here you go. I like need to know all the things that are happening with you,
Right.
because it affects your prep
Right. Yeah,
and your ability to adhere.
I don't know if you would agree with that, but literally 99% of what I'm talking about with my coaching clients is like therapy, is like
Yes.
behavioral stuff, you know, and setting
Yeah.
boundaries and understanding like what is your dream? Are you following that dream or not? Maybe that's why you're not
Mhm.
having that motivation because you know it seems like it's too far away from you're limiting yourself and your limiting beliefs are depressing you because you know deep down that those are limiting beliefs. It's not true. You can't actually get after that big dream. And so it's like, you know,
Mhm.
my hubby tells me you're not a nutritionist. You're a life coach. You're a therapist.
It's so true. It's so true. I spend a lot of time, and that's also, it's really good for me because it keeps me on my toes as far as like my continuing education and like my learning and reading new books. And I'm always looking for like books that are going to help me help my clients, right? Like, let me give you the lessons from this book, because if I tell you to read it, you're probably not going to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I do give them tools and I have a lot of resources for them if they're struggling with certain things. I have people that deal with, you know, eating disorders. That's not my specialty. You know, I've struggled with some disordered eating
Mm,
through my competition prep journey, no doubt.
mm,
But it is not my specialty. So when I start seeing clients headed that direction,
hmm.
I want to tackle it early because it can really do a number on your mental health for sure.
Can you share a little bit more about your struggles with disordered eating?
Yeah, I think so. I hate to say that it's because of bodybuilding. I don't want to ever place blame on that, because there are tons of people who do it and they don't have any issues, right? At least they're not sharing if they do.
Or they don't
But
look at it as an issue. They just treat it
yes,
as it's normal, right? If I
right.
restrict, it's normal. I'm gonna go crazy in my post
Yes,
show, right? Maybe that's also why they don't make like a big thing out of it.
correct.
Mm,
Yes. So for me, it started with that first show. It started with my, you know, with my first show, and I would, I think it lingered around for probably 13 shows, unfortunately.
right.
And probably like around the time I got my pro card, you know, those shows within that time, I was very hyper focused on my goal. I knew at that point I wanted to get my pro card, and I was managing it a lot better. It hadn't gone away as far as like the disordered eating, but for me, the disordered eating is like, I would post show, I would eat until I was sick. Like, I'm throwing up. Like, I'm eating an abnormal amount of food that I should not even be capable of consuming.
Yeah.
And that would happen for a while post show.
Yeah.
And I would gain 15, 20 pounds easy within the first like 10 days.
Right.
And at that time, there weren't the resources that we have now. You know, people weren't talking about it as much, I feel like. And I was struggling with it in silence. My coach didn't have any really experience with that kind of a thing. And so I wasn't getting any like treatment per se. I was just trying to figure it out on my own, you know? So it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, you know, I couldn't have certain foods in the house because if they were here, I would have to eat the whole thing until it was completely gone. So for instance, peanut butter was a huge trigger food. I would eat until the jar was almost gone. I'd be sick to my stomach.
Right.
Um, Brownies, I could not be around brownies for years. Like,
Right.
don't put a brownie in front of me. I will eat the whole pan of brownie. It's
Right.
funny now, but you know, it was things like that. It was going to restaurants even in the off season and be looking at food and thinking, oh my God, that probably has this many calories, not enough protein, and trying to do this like macro Jenga in my head if I couldn't like weigh it myself and, you know, be in control. So I was a hermit for a lot of my prep years because
Right.
it was just, I couldn't be anywhere where people were eating things that I couldn't have. I would get FOMO and it would make me crazy. I'd eat my salad and my chicken breast, and then I'd come home and then I would binge on whatever was here,
Yeah.
which was usually not much because I
Right.
tried not to keep stuff in the house.
Right.
But yeah, I think as I started to get a handle on my hormones and, you know, adding in the right supplements and things like that, it became a lot better and manageable, but it always lingers. And I think that's another one of the reasons why I choose not to compete anymore,
Mm.
because after my last show was my hardest show ever. I had COVID. I was in the hospital, was in the middle of my prep. I was there for 4 or 5 days with
Whoa.
pneumonia. Yeah. And I thought it would be a brilliant idea to go ahead and continue with my competition prep 9 weeks out.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
So, and this was my pro debut, mind you. This wasn't like, oh, this is just, you know, it's an NPC amateur show, no big deal. Like, I mean, they're always a big deal, but
But yeah, this is a oh
it was my pro debut. And I
yeah.
talked to the coach and I said, you know, hey, would you be willing to take me on as your project? Because he was here kind of locally. And he said, yeah, I mean, if you're up for working hard, let's do it. So I did. I think I ended up losing like 20 pounds in 9 weeks. I, you know, made it happen. It was not my best condition on stage, I will say that. But I mean, there were weeks where I was like on 900 calories, doing almost 2 hours of cardio and training,
Yeah.
running a business, running a podcast, like being a mom, trying to have a life,
Right.
you know. So it was pretty miserable. But it took me until probably I feel like last year, and it's been about 2 years, that I finally feel like I'm in a spot where food does not hold any kind of like power over me.
Mm.
In fact, one of my girlfriends and I were in Vegas for 11 days. And I mean, you know, it's Vegas. I usually don't partake in alcohol during the week here at home, but you're in Vegas, that's what you're doing. So, you know, it was espresso martinis every day and, you know, chicken strips and fries in between some healthy foods. And I got home and I'm like, I'm just curious, like how much weight I gained, right? 2 pounds. That's it. 2 pounds, right? 11 days in Vegas, lots of cookies, lots of stuff. And the girlfriend that went with me, she's a therapist. And I said, you know, I think the reason why this trip did not stick to me, like the calories, because we trained, but like it wasn't, you know, we weren't like hardcore, you know, we got some steps, was whatever. I
Right.
said that I think the reason why it didn't stick for me this time is because I went with the mindset of like, if I want something, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to feel guilty about it.
Right.
I'm going to enjoy the experience with you and like people watching and all the things. And I'm not going to obsess over, oh my gosh, this is going to take this many hours to work this off. Or now I got to eat lettuce later because I had 1,000 calories for lunch. None of that happened. And so I came home and I was like, I just feel good about being relaxed with my eating now. You know, I still eat for performance. You know, I'm still a bodybuilder at heart and I train and do all the things, but now I don't have the looming stress of food anxiety anymore, which is very nice.
I love that. I I am curious though, after that last prep, did you reverse out of it? Did your coach talk about that part of it? And
Yes.
how was that like?
So I always tell my clients, and I talk about this often on the podcast, about how reverse dieting is actually harder than the diet because especially if you don't have a show on the calendar that's like kind of hanging out there, like, okay, don't forget I'm here. You can't be a total asshole, you know?
Right.
I don't know if we can cuss on your show. I'm
Yes,
so sorry.
we can. Oh,
Okay,
please
okay.
do.
So I didn't have that, you know, and I think that's another reason why I liked doing show after show is because I knew if I had a show hanging out in the background, I wasn't going to get too squirrely and I would kind of keep things relative so it wasn't such a painful prep. But
Yeah.
after this last show, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm hanging up my heels here.
Mm.
He was amazing and worked with me on the reverse diet. It was me that was the problem, right? It was, yes, I have the marching orders. In theory, this is an excellent plan to follow,
Yeah.
but my hunger is telling me otherwise. Like I'm starving. My leptin and my ghrelin levels were, well, my leptin levels were below normal for lean people. So
You measured them?
yes,
Oh,
I
nice.
do diligent blood work every 6 months
Oh, nice.
at least. If I'm in a prep, sometimes I do it every 3 months. I want to make sure my hormones are fine and I'm not messing with anything that's going to cause long-term damage, hopefully. But yeah, my leptin was, I think for lean individuals, for women, it's 4.0 is like the bottom baseline to like 7 or something.
Mm.
And mine was barely registering at 0.1.
Whew. Wow.
Yeah. So I took some time to just try to refeed my body and get my body fat back up
Yeah.
to a set point. And honestly, it still is not recovered. My leptin, I think I had it tested 3 or 4 months ago, and it's barely at like a 2 point something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
takes a while, right? I wonder, was there cardio involved, and did you do cardio in the refeed period, in the reverse dieting period?
Mhm. Yes. So I continued to follow through with cardio. We did sort of like a taper down of
Mm,
my cardio. So I didn't cold turkey stop right after my show.
mm,
And this is sort of what I do with my athletes too, is
mm.
I don't want them to just have like a very quick influx of body fat that's just accumulating right like post show by stopping everything and just eating whatever they want.
Right.
So we kind of do a reverse in that sense. So yes, my cardio, I was doing almost 2 hours a day. And I think coming out of that show, he cut me down to, I want to say it was like 40 minutes a
Right.
day that first week. So it was a lot less. And that felt like so easy,
Yeah,
after
when
I'd
you're
been doing so
fueled.
much.
And
Mhm.
do you do it with what kind of mindset do you have around cardio, or what kind of mindset does your coach have around cardio? Is it the Greg Doucette harder than last time, or is it like just walk with incline, kind of like how Jennifer Dory does, and most of the
Mhm.
bikini athletes really do?
Yeah. So for me, with cardio and all of my coaches that I've had in the past, it has all been incredibly similar. And that's usually going to be not necessarily LISS, which is like low intensity, steady state. It's more of like, it's kind of like MISS, moderate intensity,
Mm,
um, interval training, or MIT, I should say. So it would be, yes, no running. It was
right.
the elliptical. It was not even a thing. Like I couldn't even look at an elliptical because my coaches all were like, that's not going to burn you enough calories. So it was usually, the high incline treadmill, or it was the stair mill. So I like to use the stair mill for myself and my athletes in prep, and try to save it just for prep, because it's an intense stimulus. It's more than just like the treadmill, you're lifting your body weight over and over, on the stair mill. So yeah, the treadmill is generally the go-to. High incline,
Gotcha.
speed as much as you can handle without holding the handrails, kind of a thing.
Right.
And sometimes, we'll throw in some intervals in there where you're going on a really high incline and then a flat. Same
Yeah.
thing with stairs. Sometimes I'll have my clients just pace with like skipping a step to just get their heart rate up if they're really lean. But generally, at least the school of thought with cardio, with most of my coaches and myself too, is we want to see most of the changes made by way of the diet, because that's going to be the easiest one to see some changes immediately. That's the biggest, quickest dial mover. And the cardio is like an adjunct to that and like helps, but it's not necessarily, you shouldn't use that as a crutch. So when I see women, they have like a binge moment and then they want to go do 2 hours of cardio, I'm like, you maybe burned 600, 800 calories and you eat like 2000. That's
Easy.
not, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but basically it's pretty low impact. So that way we avoid injury, especially
Yeah.
when calories are low. And,
Mm.
let's say you're 6 weeks out, I don't want people trying to run on a track or do, stairs on a track, and you're just running on low fumes, and it's really hard to think logically sometimes.
And would you say that the stairmaster or the stair mill, the reason why it's so popular is, have you found that it actually does indeed grow the glutes? And we like it's a good thing that everybody's doing the stairmaster, especially in prep.
I don't necessarily know or believe that it actually grows your glutes. I do believe that there is something to be said about the way that it leans out your legs or your lower half. So I do strongly believe that. I know that as soon as I add the stair mill in, after a couple weeks, I can start to see my leg lines start to show up and everything seems to tighten up. And I think that's also losing some body fat too in the process. But I think because you are using your body weight as a form of resistance as you're going up against gravity, that there is a component of resistance to that is keeping your body tight, I guess. I don't know that that's, necessarily true, but in my head, when I'm on that stair mill, like I'm pressing through my heel with every step, I'm like flexing my glute with every step. So it's different than just mindlessly walking on the treadmill, I feel. But you can also stair mill very wrong. Like I've seen people stair mill and they're draping their whole body over it, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Right. Shouldn't be holding on to anything, although it's hard not to hold on to stuff when you go up at the really highest levels.
Yes, definitely. I'm like, stay safe, hang on to the handrails, but when you're draping your whole body over it, I'm like, you're not doing yourself any favors there. Half your body weight is resting on the machine. So the whole goal is to be upright and, lightly hold on, but make your legs actually do the work. When people drape over, and they're putting half of their body weight on the machine, it's like their feet are just quickly moving and there's not a whole lot of engagement, I feel like, going on.
That's like half of your body that's working. You've just paralyzed the other half of your body. Okay. Let us talk a little bit about the dark side of competing. I think we talked about it in a way with your experience. What can you add to that, especially with your clients and what you tell them when they come to you and they want to compete?
So one thing that's not commonly spoken about, and a lot of coaches kind of shy away from the topic, is the use of PEDs, so physique enhancing drugs. In order to work with us on the competition team, I do what's called a physique assessment. So a client has to submit current progress photos and they fill out a pretty lengthy intake form through our software. And then I send them a talking head video that goes through all of their lifestyle things, what they said their goals were, and what I believe would take to get them there based off of what they're currently doing, and kind of give them an idea of a timeline. So I go pretty deep with our physique assessments, and some of the videos are like 15 minutes long. But in that, I start very early on having that conversation where I tell them, I also need to speak about physique enhancing drugs, not because I'm telling you need to do them, but I'm telling you because this is something that is very common in the bodybuilding world. And if you have questions, like I will answer them for you. Should this be something you're interested in, I can defer you to the proper people that are going to make sure that you do it healthy and you get blood work. And there are some clinics that offer that as a specialty for athletes. But I talk about that because I think sometimes the public looks at bodybuilding and, maybe like the bikini girls and like, oh, I really want to look like that. And, all these things. And while some of them in the pro rankings do it naturally, it's very rare. Okay. It's very rare. So I just like to put that out there. I'm not accusing anybody or saying that everybody does it, but it is a large percentage of the bodybuilding population, starting with bikini. So, I'm very transparent about my history with using PEDs. I talk about it often on my podcast, but that is the dark side, right? I'm sure you've seen or heard people on YouTube or Instagram, and you can clearly tell that they have thickening of their vocal cords when they speak. So those types of things are brought to the table immediately. Like I tell people immediately that this is out there, and should you not do it, just know, like, your prep is going to be harder. I'm not saying that enhanced athletes it's easier, but they are able to retain muscle easier because they have steroidal compounds in their system. So they're able to train kind of at the same level throughout their prep because they have enhanced,
Right.
hormones in their system versus a natural girl who is maybe on 1,000 calories and is, taking creatine or whatever. There's only so much that body is going to be able to push. And if you have an enhanced athlete, the steroids, definitely take it to a whole nother level. So that is a big, big thing that I talk about often.
And obviously they're still illegal and they will always be, I guess.
Yes.
And but what would you say are the ones that most people are using? Anavar, and
Hmm.
that's the one that comes straight to mind.
Yeah. So a lot of bikini girls are using, yes, Anavar is like the least androgenizing, I believe, steroid. So it's going to have the least amount of side effects. So
Mm,
you will see that pretty frequently, as low as the bikini entry level bodybuilding bikini girls all the way through wellness figure and beyond.
mm,
And then you also have clenbuterol, which isn't a steroid, but it's a fat burner.
right.
And it's also not legal.
Okay.
I think they prescribe it for patients who have like issues with like asthma or something like that. But so clenbuterol, Anavar, and then typically a third one. And as far as bikini girls go, they'll usually use some kind of estrogen blocker,
Mm,
because the judges want those coveted tie-ins, and as females, we generally carry a lot more body fat in our lower half for procreation purposes, genetically too. So sometimes an estrogen blocker will be used to kind of help dry up the backside of a lot of females. And then you have testosterone. Winstrol is another one as you move up the ranks in the bodybuilding divisions like wellness and figure. Primobolan. There's so many out there, so many different combinations. And then once you get into like figure and beyond, some of these girls are dabbling with compounds I would not even be okay with my clients using. I'm like,
yeah.
you're playing with fire, like you're
Right.
literally, it's not worth it for a plastic trophy.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard when everybody else is doing it and you want to win and you want to be in fitness. It's
Yeah.
hard, especially in figure,
Hmm.
to say like if you want to get your pro card or even I mean obviously bodybuilding division for females for sure, everybody's juiced up, right?
Right.
But I think even in figure, I don't see how it's very rare, I think, for somebody to compete in figure and not be able and be able to win their pro card without having to use any enhancements. Because just look at the competition. You might look
Yeah.
fantastic, but when your competition looks even more impressive for that
Right.
category, like, what are you
Yeah.
going to do?
And even in wellness as well. I mean, these girls are
Right,
like insane amounts of muscle on their lower half.
right.
And, while there is a genetic component to the girls that succeed in wellness,
Mm,
how, I mean, if you can be better, you have that mindset and you want to win, then
right.
they're going to do what it takes. And
All it
so,
takes is one woman who takes it and wins, and then everybody else now has to level up, And if
right,
you see, like,
exactly.
right, like if you look at the bikini history and how it progressed when they
Hmm.
first started, how Ashley Kaltwasser won the initial bikini divisions. There's no way now that her physique back then would win anything, like,
No, no.
nowadays. So, like, over the years, she's had to follow the trends
Hmm.
because everybody else leveled up their game. So now you have to have even
Totally.
less body fat and even more muscle, and it just keeps.
Right.
I think they're controlling it a little bit. I think with Jennifer Dory one,
Hmm.
they kind of like sent a message like, we don't want you to start looking like figure girls. There's a reason this is a separate division.
Yes, for
So,
sure. Yeah, I always say like my first figure show that I did and I took fifth place, I wouldn't even place in a bikini show now. Like in an NPC bikini show, like
right.
I was lean and everything. Like I didn't have enough muscle in that first show 10 plus years ago
Mhm.
for as a figure girl to then try to do bikini now. I would have been like, yeah, I
Would
wouldn't
you
have
say
done very
even
well.
NPC bikini, you wouldn't?
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because some of these, I mean, these NPC bikini girls, like the open division, incredible. You know, I've been to several shows this year with athletes, and the
Yeah.
girls that win the overall, they're beasts. I'm like, this girl is jacked out of her brains, right? Like shredded, peeled, jacked in all the right places.
Right.
But I didn't look like that 10 years ago doing figure, you know?
I'm wondering, do you train WBFF athletes if somebody comes to you?
I don't have any clients on my roster for WBFF, but one of my coaches does. Yeah. So I think that client's, I think she's based out of Canada. So she's doing
Right.
WBFF. But yeah, I love that division. Um, I think it's more realistic in
Right.
terms of, you know, not needing to be so shredded. It's not going to be easy still. I mean, the WBFF is still, I've seen how those girls train, but I think in terms of comparatively speaking to NPC, that they definitely trend towards a softer look in
Right.
WBFF, a more feminine, not that NPC isn't, but it's more curvy. And I think that also lends itself to the whole glam of it too, with
Right.
the dresses and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's, I think a lot of girls are now, I think Adam did a podcast with somebody and they were discussing that about the
Yeah.
WBFF. And one of the coaches on his team was switching to the WBFF. And so they talked extensively about that and how they're seeing a lot more NPC athletes switch because of that reason.
Because it's becoming a little bit more jacked with the IFBB and the NPC. They're like, you know what? I'm
Yeah.
gonna go because then you get an NPC athlete and you put her in WBFF, she'll win everything, you know, because
Yeah,
she doesn't have to train as hard. If anything, she might need to take it easy a little
for
bit,
sure.
you
For
know?
sure. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Right. And I've
Hmm.
noticed even with my coaching clients, sometimes like they'll reach out to me. They're like, yeah, because I love your body type. I love how like I feel like it's very maintainable and I want that. I want to look like
Hmm.
you. And I'm like, oh snap, because I'm always working on like leaning out even more. And I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
but it's true, it is more commercial when
Hmm.
you're not super jacked because most people feel like it's more realistic for them to be able to look like that. And then in all the
Right.
TV shows, all the celebrities, they all look like
Hmm.
that too. So we have this image in our minds that that's the ideal in a way, if that makes,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
But I don't think I can stop. I always want to like push the boundary, I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah. I've settled into those past couple years after the show, and I finally got like my eating under control and everything, where I just decided I don't want to be hungry anymore. You know,
Mm,
like I feel like I've been hungry for 10 years, you know, and I know that that's my leptin speaking. And, you know, competing back to back and all the things of being, you know, in contest prep, which is slight deprivation, let's be real, right? Like a
yeah,
contest prep, you're depriving yourself to lose your body fat.
yeah,
So I just decided like I'm grateful for the journey. I'm very proud that I did what I did, and I did remarkable for all of my shows. You know, I
yeah.
always placed even with my pro debut, and it was great. And there's still a small part of me that like, oh God, I wish I could do that again, because I go watch my clients and it's just, it looks like so much fun. I just remember loving the stage piece of it.
Yeah.
But it's all the other stuff that I'm just like, I don't know that I'm interested in doing that anymore.
I'm wondering if you, you know, you knew I was gonna bring that up at some point. I'm wondering
Hmm.
if you ever consider doing something like a keto or even carnivore in terms of competing, because that is like a double whammy. You get all the protein and it suppresses your appetite, right? For
Hmm.
a period of time. And then I think the bigger part of it is that it excludes addictive foods. Because when you're having carbs,
Yeah.
carbs can be addictive. Like even
Very.
like rice and pasta, like there are
Hmm.
studies that show it lights up the dopamine centers in the brain. So if you're not doing that, your brain calms down a little bit or a lot,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
My last coach, he used a much more of a, I don't want to say keto, but it was definitely mainly, it was mainly meats and it was, or proteins, and it was mainly fats and oils. And I had very minimal carbohydrates because I was trying to get, you know, super lean.
Mm,
Um, I have found personally, and I don't know if there's a workaround, which you're probably the person to ask, but I don't know, my body just cannot handle that much fat because I don't have a gallbladder anymore. So it
right.
causes me a lot of GI issues. And I haven't necessarily honed it down to a specific thing. So it's like, oh, it's, you know, avocado or whatever. But it would be interesting to experiment with. And I'm not opposed to it at all because I have heard the amazing things about it. And I'm always up to try stuff just to have some kind of anecdotal, you know,
Yeah,
experience with it. But no, I have not tried just straight keto or
right.
a carnivore for prep.
Definitely, the gallbladder issue is pretty relatively common. Um, and I've known a lot of carnivores that can do it, but you would have to slowly adapt your body to more
Yeah.
and more fat, you know, and then spread out your meals into multiple
Hmm.
meals as opposed to doing OMAD or one meal a day and you're just having
Mm.
like two huge ribeyes, you
Right.
know, then yeah, your body needs a little bit of time to adapt, but it totally does adapt
Hmm.
to that. And at the very least, you can maybe supplement it if you're doing cardio, you can supplement it with some white rice or something like that. I know I just said
Hmm.
it's addictive, but it's not going to be as addictive as some other foods like protein bars and things that have that sweet
Right.
taste and
Yeah.
those combinations.
Protein bars were my nemesis last year. It was so bad.
They're candy.
Yeah. I was just like, and I still have them occasionally, like when I'm in a pinch or a bind, but I was just relying on them as meals, like because I had sweet cravings so bad.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I've had that happen to me too in previous weight loss cuts and where I
Yeah.
wasn't paying attention to the addiction potential of the foods and before you know it I remember one day I had 4 Quest bars. I was like, okay, so
Yeah.
something's not
Yeah.
working here, you
Yeah,
know?
no, the Quest bars, they were my addiction for a while too, for sure. Yeah.
So
But
good.
there's, I mean, they can't, you know, they're definitely a kind of like a crutch to get in like that sweet thing, you know, for me sometimes where if I'm having cravings here at home and I have protein bars, I'm like, I'm just gonna have a protein bar and call it good and go to bed. And like,
Right.
I'm fine.
It's so much
But
better than a pack of Oreos, you know?
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. And that's something that I've kind of with coaching people, you start to realize how important it is to not hold on to the perfectionism so much because then
Yeah.
it's like what happens with prep, right? Restrict binge cycles. And so I've mellowed out a lot and I make sure they understand like there's a spectrum of, you know, good
Mhm.
to worse foods and you don't if,
Yes.
you know a lot of people come to me like I just want to do carnivore fine we try it if you're struggling a lot and you're having cravings and then you're having binges it's like okay we can build you up to be able to do that strict carnivore that is going to remove all inflammation fantastic but you have to work your way up there you have to change your palate a little bit and you have to understand there's a spectrum of worse to better foods and make those decisions and just see how your decisions are getting better over time until finally your brain chemistry changes, your palate shifts, and it becomes
Mhm.
easier to stick to the diet that you want to stick to, like the carnivore, for
Yes.
example, you know?
Right. Which is brilliant if you think about it. And I think if clients are willing to be in it for the long haul with a coach, you know, specific to bodybuilding, and you're able to do that, you know, which I try to do with most of my clients is I don't like to take clients on that I don't have a history of working with them for a little bit and then just like put them into a prep, right? Like I like to get some time to get to know their body, like what foods they deal well with, what kind of foods they tend to gravitate towards. And then I will build like their prep meal plans based off of that as much as I can. But I think it's great to be able to work with a coach so you can like tiptoe your way into it and let your body and your taste buds and everything adjust. Like with my first show, there was no adjustment. It was like drinking beer, eating grilled cheese sandwiches and fish sticks to rice, chicken, broccoli, you know,
Right.
and zero alcohol for, I don't know, 30 weeks or something.
Zero
So it
dessert.
was, yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely a shocker, but it makes perfect sense to just be able to kind of wean yourself into it, I guess, or ramp
Yes.
yourself up.
It
Yeah.
always works. Definitely. It's worked for me in the past, and I know now it works with my clients too. Because and I can see how relaxed they get once I allow that flexibility. It's like, oh, like they felt like they had to be so perfect initially.
Hmm.
And clearly you tried it, it didn't work. So let's relax a little bit, set a goal that's a little bit lower, but to get that momentum, you know, then that's
Yeah,
when
you
you
have
move
to.
into. right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the small wins that keep people going. You know, they get
Yeah.
motivated and like, okay, I did it. I did it. It's been a week. That's why I don't know how often you check in with your clients or, you know, sort of your strategy, but that's why I think it's great when you start working with a coach that you check in with, you know, every week if you have some big goal, because as a coach for me, I'm looking at all the data and I'm like, you know, clients, obviously we're usually the hardest on ourselves, but when I see their stuff, I'm like, okay, you worked out 4 times this week. Last few weeks, you've only done 2. That's a great success, right? Like
Right.
you kind of give them these things to think about that they would just think, well, I didn't hit 5, so I'm failing. And I'm like, that's not how it works, you know?
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Okay. Um, I guess we covered the main things that I wanted to cover. Maybe two quick questions still with regards to reverse dieting. Do you generally reverse all of the clients after a cut, and also do you give them cheat meals? And I know that might be a little bit of a general question.
No, this is great.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with all my clients, yes, I call it a recovery diet instead of a reverse diet. And I like them to get into the mindset of like, I'm recovering from this grandiose thing that I just put my body through, right?
Mm,
And I just kind of coined that term because I knew for me, every time I was coming out of a show, I would get labs done and it would be lit up like a Christmas tree, right? There'd be so many things like off the charts. And I just kept thinking, like, gosh, I need to like recover from this, you know, like this was like really a lot of trauma to my body for
mm,
extended periods of time. And so I just started calling it the recovery period. And also too, so clients get in the mindset of like, I need to be kind to myself, I need to be kind to my body, like it undertook this major thing. And so yes, I try to get my clients to at least do 8 weeks with me post show and try to just do their best to follow the plan for 8 weeks. It's going to be bumpy, it's not going to be perfect, especially if there's not another show, but at least I can kind of help you. I always say, like, imagine when you know, you're a little kid and you go bowling and they put up the bumpers, right? And you throw the ball and the ball's kind of going all over the place, but it's staying in the lane and it still gets there. That's what like the recovery or the reverse process feels like you're just bumping around, you know, you have these guidelines you're supposed to follow, but you're still not making it, but somehow you just get through. And that's what I try to really get them to understand and focus on different goals and have them focusing on performance in the gym, progressive overload, getting their hormones back on track, repairing relationships, you know, because when you go into a prep for 30 weeks, most of my clients, you shut a lot of people out. You're not doing as many social things. You're not going out on date nights with your partner. You're maybe not going to the movies with your kids because, you know, the food situation is always present. It's a lot more challenging to be present when you're fixated on what you can't have. So it's a
yeah.
lot of coaching post show for that.
30 weeks, that's a long prep, right? Like
Yeah.
that's how many months is that? I
That's
don't like to
five,
do math in public.
6, 7-ish months.
Wow.
And the reason why I usually do that mainly for new clients that I've never prepped before. And the reason why is I tell them in to answer your second question is because over the course of 30 weeks, this gives us a long runway. If
Mhm.
life gets lifey and you get sick, a kid gets sick, you miss a gym, God forbid somebody dies, you get a new job, like life still happens
Right.
while you're prepping. And if we're trying to do that in 12 weeks or 16 weeks and something happens, then we're thrown off, we're behind. So that's one of the reasons. And then the second reason, we'll have several. The second reason is I like to have my clients ready ahead of time. So we're not like trying to crunch to the last minute and like doing 2 hours of cardio up until like,
Mm,
you know, peak week.
mm,
And then the third reason is because I strategize different checkpoints where they are going to have structured refeeds. So I'm not a big fan of like cheat meals. And I
mm.
think that's because my first coach would tell me, okay, you know, we're ahead of schedule. On Saturday, I want you to have a 6 hour window of whatever you want to eat. Literally. So the first time I ever got a cheat meal with that coach, I went to Walmart and I bought every single snack food. I bought a toaster. I bought a waffle maker, like, because I wanted everything, you know?
Right.
And so I don't want to create that environment for my clients, and it does a lot more damage than good. And then your cravings are off the charts for a few days. So what I will generally do is structured refeeds, which is generally just more than what you're already eating, but the same foods. And then I do have a handful of clients that have done subsequent shows with me, and I know their adherence is phenomenal. So what I will do with them is I give them options for a refeed meal. Usually it's something pretty clean, like a couple sushi rolls that are like a rainbow roll. There's not fried stuff. There's no sauces. It's basically fish and rice, right? Just made into a little roll. So I'll say like, okay, you can go out, you can have 1 or 2 sushi rolls, depending on where they're at. Or I will say like, you can have a steak and a baked potato and some veggies. So like go have a steak dinner, right? Harmless, all single ingredient item foods. And then I just tell them to kind of manage their sauces and everything appropriately and no alcohol and stuff like that. But generally only hand that out to clients that I know will adhere and they've been doing really, really well and we're on track.
Yeah. And definitely on the blander side of things, we're not doing deep fried Oreos for your cheat. And then the next day you're expected to go back to like the chicken.
Yeah, I'm not like, go have a pizza, you know, don't do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's super structured and but they like that. They like the fact that it's just like I'm telling them like, okay, go do this and like it doesn't disrupt the plan.
Yeah.
And it kind of like gives them a motivation to keep going. They feel more energized. Their workouts for the next few days are really great because they had this like, you know, abundance of calories for a little bit that's lasting. So their training sessions are usually really great.
So you're not focused on like raising carbs too much. It's just like more calories in that meal. That's it.
Yeah. And I try so bodybuilding diets classically are very low fat, which I'm sure you've seen and heard over the years. So generally their dietary fat gets really, really low. Like I try not to drop it below 30 grams per day, if at all possible. And that's like at the tail end, just for hormonal health, all the things.
Yeah.
But there are some cases where we get lower than that. And then when the refeed comes, I tend to generally keep it mainly like an influx of just a simple carb like white rice or potato, and then, you know, the fish or, you know, meat for protein. But yeah, it's generally raising up their carbs a little bit.
You're right. And just to stress again, like you're not going off like an extra 1,000 calories from potatoes, like tons of potatoes.
No.
You know, it's like literally just a small increase, a tiny little uptick than the usual. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Well,
yeah.
Diane, thank you so much. Where do you see yourself moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years? And then where can people find you to work with you?
Yeah, no, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I think in the next probably 5 to 10 years, I am looking towards actually next year moving my offerings into more of a group coaching setting, not necessarily for contest prep, but like what we call in our studios called the Goddess Body Project. So I call it like the prep before the prep. It's like our 12-week signature program that you go through with a coach, very similar to one-on-one contest prep coaching. It's identical really, but it's pushing you outside your comfort zone, kind of like the very first program I ever did when I hired Julie Lori 10, whatever, 16, whatever many years ago it was, where I was like, I had this photo shoot and I knew that unless I had a coach, I wasn't going to push myself outside of my normal comfort zone. So we offer that right now, but we offer it on a one-on-one basis with a coach. So we're limited to how many people we can take. And the podcast has brought in a lot of interest for people that want to work with us, but they're, you know, it's either budget or we don't have space. So 2024, I'm going to be launching a group coaching offering in that Goddess Body Project program. So it'll take them through and it won't be as personalized one-on-one, but it'll be all of our methods for getting somebody into a 12-week transformation program. So I anticipate that's probably going to go pretty well because a lot of people have already shown interest. And I think that that's probably the direction I'm going to be moving more so, is working with group clients like that.
Yeah, I started doing that and it's definitely working because I have clients that they just cannot afford or they prefer just general group coaching, you know, and so if I only offered one-on-one, they like now that I opened up the group coaching a few months ago, definitely I have a whole other set of people that have
I
joined
love that.
that are more
Yeah.
interested in that type, yeah, as opposed to so
Mhm.
personalized, you know?
I would
That's
love
why,
to hear more about that for sure.
yeah, I definitely recommend it for sure, especially as it
Mhm.
grows, then, you know, it becomes
Yeah.
more impactful. So
Yeah.
perfect. Where can people find
Oh,
you, Diane?
yes. So you can find me if you want to check out the studio. It's venusfitnessstudio.com, and that's our local studio there. You can also access our nutrition coaching and competition coaching there as well. So we do a program called Ditch Deprivation, which is just strictly nutrition coaching. Then we have the Goddess Body Project, which is going to be more of an intensive 12-week transformation where we give you the training program and all that. And then we have contest prep coaching and the Goddess Body Elite Team. And then I also have Boss Bitch Radio, which is my podcast, which is all things health, fitness, empowerment, motivation, relationships, anything, kind of all topics. So yeah. And then I'm over on the gram. So Diane Flores underscore IFBB underscore pro.
Perfect. Yeah, our Instagram handles are showing up on the screen right now, and I'll make sure also I add your
Awesome.
links under the description box of this YouTube video so people can find you easily. Thanks
Thank you for
again,
that.
Diane. This
Yeah.
was
Thank you so much.
so fun. Yeah,
Yes, it was. Well, I will see you over on Instagram, and thanks for having me.
absolutely. And thank you everybody for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. If you did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.